Rendering. Stupid thing. Alright, so I hate lectures because they remind me of school, but sometimes some people need to be lectured because they don't understand what rendering. I keep getting asked a lot on Facebook, what is rendering? How do you render? What's an image sequence? How do you render? Why do you take them into After Effects and composite your stuff in there? Well, this is going to be a quick video. I'm going to show you, actually it's not that quick because I have 3 ways of showing you how to render, how to make a movie. Because rendering, let me explain rendering. Rendering is a way to create an image out of your scene. So right now we're in Maya. I created this little quick bouncing ball. I did it in like 5 or 10 minutes, so it's not the most realistic bouncing ball, but it's just quick animation. So if you want to make this into a movie, or I want to show this to your friends, your family, or put it on a demo reel, I can't do anything with it right now because it's in the Maya file. It's a scene right now, right? I'm not gonna go to my grandmother and say, hey, you want to see my movie? And she's like, okay. So then you're not gonna give her the Maya file and expect her to open it with Maya because she doesn't know what Maya is, right? So you can't do anything with the Maya file like I have right now. If I want to put this on my demo reel, I have to make this into a movie, an AVI or a MOV, right, or QuickTime. So how do we do that? In order to do that, to make it into a movie or an image, we need to do what's called rendering. So rendering is a process that the computer does automatically for us to create an image, and then a bunch of images put together is what makes a movie. So that's all the rendering is. It's just Maya taking each one of these frames here and then making it into an image, but it has to do its own little calculation thing. So that's what rendering is. It's very simple, going through each frame and then making it into an image. So let me show you what rendering is. So if you come up here, you're gonna see the open render view. You can click on that. It's gonna show you this render that I did previously, but you can compare here how this one here is very low quality. It's just for me to preview it, while this one looks more like a real image, like a real ball with shadow, and you can see the ground. So this is what the audience is gonna see. You can come in here and say file, save it. You can save this as a GIF, a JPEG, or PNG, or a Photoshop document, right? So this is how you actually now create images. So to do that, you can use this button right here. It says render the current frame. So if I press that, there, it rendered. This is one image and it's frame 12. So you can see how I went from this to this. It has more higher quality shadows. It has, it's a rendered image of what we're working with. So that's what rendering is. It's kind of like hitting print on your computer right after you wrote a page. When you hit print and then you have a page, that page was rendered through your printer. So it's sort of the same thing. Now you can take that paper and show it to your teacher, pass it around in school, have people read it, because now it's viewable to everyone. They don't need to have like that Word program in your computer to read it. Now it's rendered into a page. Sort of the same thing here now. Now with this, I can render it out into a movie, and now I can share it with my friends and family or whoever. So I'm going to show you how to render stuff. So the first type of rendering is a preview render. So a preview is, again, you do not have lighting. It's just to show your timing. So in order to do that, I go to Window. You're going to see down here Playblast. So a Playblast is like a quick preview of just motion. You want to see motion and the actual real timing of things, you do a Playblast. Open up the option box, and then again you have very simple settings. You have time slider, which is going to create a preview from this time slider, or you can customize your own by starting and frames. This it's okay by default, and then it's gonna say what do you want to make. You want to make an AVI or a QuickTime, or you want an image. Now if you don't have either or, you probably don't have one installed, so you need to install QuickTime or you need to install Windows Media Player. So I'm gonna make a QuickTime, and I always prefer QuickTime over AVIs, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to make a QuickTime, and then encoding is kind of like compression. So you never want to get the highest quality when you're making a preview, because making high quality previews means your file size is going to go really large. Sometimes it can be like a couple of 100 megabytes or maybe even into the gigs. And when you have like a 1 gig video for just like 20 seconds, it's hard to preview it or to play it smoothly. So it's gonna, your computer's gonna chug. So I like to compress it to give me a smaller file size. So I like to use this Renson Video 3, and then quality and scale I can leave it up to 100, or you can, you know, lower it if it's still too, the file size is still too large. And then you can save the file, or you can not save it. So I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna call this ball bounce preview, and I'm gonna tell it to save it in the desktop. Call it bouncing ball or whatever. And so now it's gonna save it on my desktop, and then I'm just gonna say Playblast. It's gonna run through and create a preview. It's not going to be so much of a render as much as it is a quick preview, and then it's going to open up in QuickTime. And then from here it looks exactly the same way as it looks in your viewport. There's no lighting, no shadows, there's nothing that looks awesome. But if I click play, I get the actual timing of things. So sometimes if you have a lot of stuff in your Maya scene and it's pretty heavy, and you click play here, you're gonna notice that things don't move realistically, or things are chugging, or maybe your computer doesn't have a lot of RAM and you have a lot of stuff in here. So you want to do a Playblast here, and then this will allow you to view the real time or the actual time of your final movie once you render it. So the reason why we like to do QuickTimes better than AVIs or opening it with Windows Media Player is because we have the option here to see frame numbers, and also I can use the arrow keys to go forward by pressing right or go backwards by pressing left. So when you're an animator and you want to look at what's working and what's not, you want to see it in slow motion here. And then once you find an area that has sort of like a problem, you can look down here and it'll tell you what frame you need to fix. So frame 6 here, I can tell the animator, hey, on frame 6 I don't like the way the ball is squashing here, so squash it some more. And then I can close this, and then if I go to frame 6, well, actually it's off by 1 frame because I'm starting from frame 1, not from frame 0. But you know, from frame, okay, it's frame 7 here, you'll see the squash. So I can probably even change this to start at frame 0. Doesn't really matter. And so now when I do the Playblast again, it should be right. But now you can see here I saved it into the desktop. So this is 92 kilobytes. It's a very, very small file size, which is exactly what we want. The quality looks okay. You know, I can see what's going on. It's not too pixelated. So that's what we want. So I'm going to delete that. That's one way of doing a preview. Now it's not a render. To do a render now, we actually have to go over here under rendering. So go to your main Windows here and go to rendering, and you're going to see over here under the renders tab, you're going to see batch render. But before we click that, we have to look at our rendering settings. So to find all this, you'll find it up here. So this is your render viewer. So whatever you rendered, you can see it here. And you have your render settings over here. And you have an IPR render, which is sort of updates on demand as you change your lighting and stuff like that. But we won't look at that now. And then I can render the current frame. So this is what I'm seeing in my viewport. So usually if you have 4 viewports open like this, you normally have to select what viewport you want to see it from. So if I do a render, you notice it's going to be from my top viewport because I selected the top viewport. If I go from the front, click on it and render it, it's going to be from the front, or there, or it should be. Okay, in that case it's not. Let's see if I do it that way. Yeah, okay, it is. So that's the side viewport, and I can click on the perspective, render it. Now it's on my perspective viewport. So depending on what you have selected or what you have maximized, that's what the viewport is going to render. And then here again, it's another shortcut to render that frame. I can move ahead, render that frame, so you can see it updates. Or I can select a particular area that I want to render only, and I can say render region. So that's only going to update that little box I have selected. So if I render that, if I move it ahead, it's only going to render that region right there, even as it moves away. So it's only updating that. And then again, you can render the whole thing. What else? Snapshot. Take a little snapshot of this. I don't have much use for it, but it's up to you. IPR, I'm not gonna get into that right now, but pretty much what you would do is, if you had a light in here, you would press that button and then it'll scan it. And then what you do is you do selection, and then you can see there it's scanning it. So if you had a light in here, you would adjust the shadows or the intensity, and as you're moving the intensity of the light, it'll automatically update it right here, whatever you have selected. And this IPR render only works if you're under Maya software, not under Mentoray or any of these others. So right now we're looking at Maya software. This one, I don't know, you can refresh your IPR, which is going to do the entire thing, but I'm not looking at IPRs right now. So to cancel your render, you hit escape. What else do we have here? Display render settings, just another shortcut for that button there. So these are your render settings. We're going to look at that in a second. This one will display, let me re-render that. This will display your actual colors, which is RGB, as we see right now. And then this one will display the alpha channel. So it's going to be black and white. So this displays everything that is going to render. So everything in white means there's something there. If it's grayed out, it means it's sort of transparent. And if it's black, means there's nothing there. So that's a quick way to see what you're going to be rendering, or what's there in your scene. Sometimes if you have a black object on a black background, you don't know if it's going to render or if it rendered. So you can press this and you'll see it outline in white if it rendered. So again, you can toggle between color and alpha channel. 101, that just means if you zoom in or you zoom out too much, you press the 101. It's going to show you the actual rendering size. And then this one is, you want to save the rendered image, you can sort of save it. So for example, let me go to the beginning and render this, and then let's say, okay, I want to compare this to another frame, so let me save this frame. So just press that, and then now it's saved. You see we get this little slider down here. So if I move now ahead, and right there where it squashes, I re-render this frame, and there it is. Now I can go between those frames that I have saved in there. So again, I can save this squashed image, say keep image, I can move ahead here, so now it goes up, re-render this, and then save it. Now as I select this, it's gonna go through those 3 images I saved. So it's pretty cool when you're messing with lighting and you want to compare it to a previous render. And you can also delete whatever frame you have selected. So if I go in there, it's going to delete whatever I'm viewing right now. So I can delete that one. Now that one is gone. I can no longer see it. If I want to delete the one where it's at the bottom, delete. Now it's gone. And that's pretty much it. That's how you do a render on 1 frame. Now, what if you want to render out a movie, right? Like I said, we don't want to hand out just a Playblast. You know, a Playblast isn't high quality or anything like that. We want to render out the actual final AVI. So one way to do it is you go to your render settings under common. Now remember, we're still under Maya software here. If you go under mental ray, you're going to notice we're not going to get the option to make an AVI file or movie, I should say now. So mental ray will not work. Haven't looked into exactly why. Maybe it will, but I'd never do AVIs regardless. So go to Maya software, and now you're going to see here AVI. So you can select here AVI, and then here file name prefix, you can give that file a name. So I'm going to call this bouncing ball test. And then here you have your compression again if you want to choose a compression. So I'm going to compress it just because I don't want a large file size. If you want it to be uncompressed, you go to uncompressed, which means it's going to be the highest quality, but it's going to give you the largest file size. So I'm going to use this one, Xvid. It's very common. Again, you can configure it if you want. You have quality, so smallest file size or the highest. It's up to you. Say OK. And then here you want to make sure that you have the correct extension selected. So just if you wanted to do a single frame, we're not going to be using single frames. We're going to be using multiple frames. And the extension for an AVI, usually it's the name of the file .avi. That's what you see. So we need to use this type of format, name.extension, because this one does not have an extension. This one does. So name.extension is going to be replaced with AVI. So make sure you're under name extension, and then down here you can tell it the frame range you want to render. Now this is important because a lot of you will probably skip out on this and it'll only render like 1 frame or a couple of frames. So you have to make sure that your time range down here in your timeline is actually set to what you want to render. So mine is actually was set previously, so I want to start from frame 0, not from frame 1, and then say end at frame 60, which that's what I want, and then render by each consecutive frame. So render by 1 frame at a time. You can actually tell it to skip frames. So if I do 2 frames, now it's going to render every 2 frames, which I don't want that. I want it to render every frame. Let's move down. Here is where you tell it what camera do you want to render from. Do you want to render from the front view, from the side view, from the top view, or if you have your own camera that you created, it will appear here. But I want to render off the perspective right now, which is what I'm viewing. And then the size of the image or the video is preset right here. You can choose one. So you can make it really small, sort of medium size. You can go HD, which is, you can start from HD 720 or HD at 1080. But for this preview, I'm going to leave it at 640 by 480, which is sort of small. Or you can customize your own width and height, and then everything else is set okay. I'm going to leave it as is. And then now we're ready to render this, but before we do, you want to look at where you're going to render it out to. Okay, so it's gonna be saved here under common. You'll see path, and then it says C drive users, my name, desktop, inside of a folder called ball bounce, inside of a folder that says images. So if I find that, you should see it on my desktop. So here it is, ball bounce, inside of a folder called images. So it's gonna create it in here. So here are my temporary files that it created, but I don't need that right now. That was just something that I did previously, but it's gonna go in here under images. So let's go ahead and make that movie. So to do that, now that my settings are set, Maya software, I have it going into the images folder. I have a name, it's an AVI set to name.extension. I have my frame range from 0 to 60. It's going to render every frame, and I'm going to render off from the perspective viewport at 640 by 480. So I know it seems like a lot, but you have to be aware of how exactly do you want to render this out to. So another thing you might want to check is exactly what you're going to render out. So I don't want all this empty area. The ball bounce only happens around in here. So to view exactly what we're going to render, we can toggle this button here on. It says resolution gate. If I push that, I get this little square happening here. So let's see here, and I can turn this on and off. I'm gonna go into the options, select the camera for the perspective, and go down here to display options. So here you can change the gray area and then the opacity of it. You can change the overscan. So holding control, click and dragging here, you're gonna see exactly what it's gonna render. So this was sort of too big, I couldn't see it, so I'm gonna make it smaller. So everything inside of this square here, that's what we're gonna render. It's gonna be inside the image. So I can come in here and adjust my camera, zoom in. So click play again. I want to make sure I get everything. So it starts there, bounces, and it stops there. So I'm happy with that. Now I can tell it to render this. Now I can leave it on. I can leave this resolution gate on. It's not going to render with it, so you're not going to see this. So everything that's out in the gray area, it will not render. You will not see it. Everything inside of here, you will see it. So let's go ahead and render this. Now I don't have any lights, so there's not going to be any shadows or anything, but we're going to create an AVI file. So now that I'm done with my settings and everything, I'm happy with it. It's going to render out here. I can close this and say rendering, render, and go to batch render. Now a lot of these settings doesn't really matter, so I like defaults are okay. Just go ahead and hit batch render. And then what this is going to do, you can see down here, you're going to see rendering with Maya software, and it's going to do its thing. You're going to see it render each frame fairly quickly because I don't have lights or anything. You can see here it's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going very quick, each frame by frame, until I do 60 frames. So it's about 50, 60, 70 there. And when you see this rendering completed, now you know it's actually done. So again, I can minimize this. I know I went into the ball bounce folder inside of images, and there you go. We called it bouncing ball underscore test. I can click on that, and it's 117 kilobytes, which is very, very small file size, and it's good. And now we have a rendered ball, and you can see that it actually follows the rendering square that we had here. So I positioned the ball up here, and then it ended up right there, and that's actually the camera frame that we see. So that's it. This now I can share it with anyone. Now Now you can give it to your grandmother. This is an AVI, right? You can give it to your grandmother, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your teacher. You put it on your demo reel, and this is what is going to get viewed by people. You can put this on YouTube. You know, this is how I do most of my stuff as well. So again, AVIs also open with QuickTime, so I can open with QuickTime. And then I can actually review it here if I was in a studio. So I would click play. Oh, let's see if it's gonna work. Oh, I told it to open some stupid thing here. Nope, so it's not gonna work. Probably need some plugin or whatever, so I guess it doesn't work with QuickTime. Oh, actually it should, but because I chose this type of codec, remember under my settings, this compression, actually I chose XVID. If I did a full uncompressed, it would have worked. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's call this one full and compressed. So I'm gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna try it again. Render, batch render. Then it's gonna go ahead and run it again. So I'm gonna pause it, and boom, I'm back. The beauty. Oh, it wasn't done. Is it done? It's not done. Is it completed? Okay, there it goes. Now it's completed. Jeez. So there we go. Now I have two files here. This one is the full uncompressed. Now compare the compressed one, which is 117 kilobytes, compared with the uncompressed. Now it's 71 megabytes. That is a crap load of megabytes compared to 1 kilobyte. So if I try to open this, you can see how it's trying to chug here, because it's 100 megabytes for just like what, 2 seconds. So again, Windows Media Player doesn't do such a good job at playing large file size. So because it's uncompressed, I can actually now open it with QuickTime, and I think QuickTime does a better job at playing larger file sizes. Oh, it's 71 megabytes. So let's try it, see what happens. But notice now that it opened with QuickTime because we didn't use a compression. So I can even do Control L in QuickTime to loop. So when I click play, it's gonna loop. And again, I can change the frame rate and see the frame here. So you can see frame 7 is a squashing frame. Let's see if that's true. Frame 7, yeah. So there you go. Now I fixed that by going all the way up to frame 0. So actually this player starts from like frame 0. So if I would go to here, you can see frame 0. That's why I added, or I took away a frame. So now it's actually accurate from the frames in Maya compared to my frames in QuickTime. So if I go to frame, let's see, frame 27, it should be right on the ground. So frame 27 right there, you can see how frame 27, it is on the ground. So now this is accurate, and this is why many animators prefer using QuickTime. So that is how now we can create a movie. Now before I let you go, I know there's a lot here, but it's rendering is how we do it professionally in a studio, or probably just in school. You do it like this, you render an AVI. Professionally, I never render out from an AVI, because here's why. If I'm rendering this AVI, this movie, and I go ahead and I come in here, render, batch render, and I let it do its batch render, and you see it here, you know, running through its render of each frame. And for some reason, you know, you can never predict this. If Maya crashes during your render, and let's say you have a lot of stuff in your scene, you have a lot of lights, and it's actually taking, let's say for example, it's taking 20 minutes to render one freaking frame. Do you know how long it's gonna take you to render? Let's say you're rendering 200 frames of your animation at 20 minutes per frame. That's gonna take a long time. And let's say you were like almost done. It was like 90% done rendering, and it took you like almost the full day, and then Maya for some stupid reason just crashes on you. Guess what? This file is not gonna work. This AVI, it's not gonna work. You're gonna click on it and it's gonna say error, corrupted file, or cannot read. So you lost, or you wasted a full day of rendering. So that is why I do not like to create AVIs when you're rendering something that's heavy. But pretty much, actually, I never render like this. The way that I render, I'm gonna delete all this. The way that I render and studios render is by creating an image sequence. So what is an image sequence? An image sequence, you cannot view it like a movie. You cannot show it to anyone because it's just a bunch of images. What Maya does is it renders this frame and it saves it as like a JPEG, and then it renders frame 1, and then it saves it out as JPEG number 2, JPEG 3, 4. So you have a whole bunch of images of each frame, but you cannot view it because they're just photos, they're images. So you actually would have to take those image sequence and then bring them into another software and then render it out again as a movie. Now, what's the benefit of doing an image sequence? I'm going to prepare this for an image sequence. I'm going to show you why it's very important to do it this way. So I'm going to do it again, Maya software. I'm going to call this ball bounce sequence. And it's not going to be an AVI. It's going to be, I can do JPEGs if I want it. So you see JPEG here. For this example, I'm going to do a JPEG. But remember, if you save it as a JPEG, since we don't have anything in the background here, it's going to be white. So I believe it's going to be white. If you save it as, for example, something that keeps the transparency, like a PNG, or you do a TIFF, where is it, TIFF? TIFF, that's going to keep this transparent. So if I take it into like After Effects, I can actually add an image behind that. So I'm going to show you that way. So I'm going to do a TIFF just because it's uncompressed. It's sort of a high quality. And then I'm going to do name.number.extension. So it's going to say my name is going to be bouncing ball underscore sequence, and then number is gonna, Maya is gonna automatically assign a number to each frame. So for example, frame 0 is gonna be 0, and then it's gonna add the next image a 1, and then a 2, and then a 3, 4. So it's gonna automatically add a number to the next frame in order. So that's very important. And then I needed to show my extension, which is going to be a TIFF. So what we're going to end up with is bouncing ball underscore sequence, and then the number of the file, and then dot TIFF. So this is useful. Don't get it confused with any other of these. I never use these, but I believe, I'm not sure if After, oh no, okay, now I'm confusing it with Maya. Maya doesn't accept actually this. I think it accepts like this type, but don't worry about that. Name.number.extension is what we're worried about. Frame padding is how many numbers of zeros. So you can see down here, file name. This is what it's going to look like. Bouncing ball underscore sequence dot a number dot TIFF. So how many numbers are you going to need? How many zeros are we going to need? So if I add 2, 3, 4, you can see it adds more zeros here. So if it's going to go up to like 1,000, I would add 4 because that's going to be like 4 digits that can go in here. But it's going to go up to 60, so just 2. So that gives it room for 2 numbers there. And then again, we already have that set. Start from 0 and at 60. Render each frame. Render from the perspective. Render from 640 by 480. And that's it. So pretty much the only thing that we changed was these 3 things here, or 2 things: image format and extension format. Once we're done, I need to be aware that it's going to go under the bouncing ball folder image. Okay, let's go ahead and close this. And again, render, batch render. We do it the exact same way. So we're going to let Maya do its thing. It's going to render. So again, sort of like printing, right? When you print, we don't do anything but sit back and let the printer do the little thing. So it's sort of the same thing in Maya. When Maya does its rendering, we do nothing but sit around and play video games, or you can poke your nose, or I don't know what you do. You can stare at the wall or watch the grass grow. You know, it's pretty awesome. You can, I don't know, talk to your homie on the phone. And it's done. Did it really go through all those frames that quickly? Wow, I have a fast computer. Just kidding. So let's check it out, see if it's true. So we should see what's called a sequence in here. Boom, look at that. What in the world? That's right, this is a sequence. So I'm going to change this. And you can see how Maya added a number here. So bouncing ball underscore sequence dot 00, 01, 02, 3, all the way up to frame 60. So this is actually a sequence now, which means one frame comes after the next one in order. So this is a sequence. So if you screw up your numbers here, let's say you come in here and you physically change it to something else and you screw it up, it's not going to read it all through. It's going to get confused in the numbers. So the numbers have to go in sequence, in order. Now to view this, I believe you select the first one, right click, and if you have this F check or frame check, open it with that, and then you're gonna see this thing pop up, and then this one. So this is the first frame. You have to select the first frame and then open the sequence now. So go to File, open Animation, and then find the first frame of the entire sequence. So in this case, it's going to be 00 is the first one in the sequence. And then once you just select that first file, you say open, and then it's going to run through. Should run through each frame, and it's going to load them up in order. So let it do its thing. Shouldn't take that long. And then once it's done loading them, you'll be able to play them as you're going to see them. So while it's doing this, let me explain to you now why a sequence is what we use in a professional studio. So like I said, if it was taking you 20 minutes per frame because you have a lot of lighting, a lot of characters, awesome effects and all that stuff, and let's say again you were at 90% done rendering and Maya crashed, guess what? It's okay. It can crash, and let's say it was at frame 50 out of 60 and it crashed at frame 50. You can actually come in here and let's say it crashed right there, right? So you don't have frame 51, 52 and all that, but because they're images, it actually stores your images in here one by one. So frame 1 through 50 are going to be okay because it rendered an image and it's already saved in your folder. But now we need to continue, which you can continue by just going into your settings here. And what you do now is say, well, from frame 1 or from frame 0 through 50, it's okay. I just need now from frame 50 to 60. So now you can continue your rendering exactly where you left off. So that is the beauty of doing an image sequence. And it's what we do at professional studios. It's the way it's been done for a long time. Now again, in school you might not be asked to do it this way because there's actually an extra step into making a movie, but it's more secured. If you're rendering something that's higher in render time, render out a sequence. So a sequence is just selecting anything other than an AVI. So a TIFF, a PNG, a JPEG, and coming in here and selecting this extension, name.number.extension. Now I'm selecting this extension because I'm going to take this sequence into After Effects. So let me open up my frame check, and you can see it's playing now that it loaded. So this is what your final output is going to look like. Now right now we're just checking it. I cannot hand this off to someone else and have them view it because nobody has F-check installed on their computer, but only crazy animators. So okay, the good thing is we have all of these files saved in here. So I can close this out. I can come in here and open After Effects. So I'm going to try to keep this video short. This is going to wrap everything up. So it's professional rendering here. This is how it's done in the studio. I'm not making this shit up. Look it up. So there's Playblast for a quick preview for animators. There is an AVI if you just want it quick and out and dirty and you don't care if it crashes, but it works. And then there is a professional method, compositing. So now I have After Effects open. I'm not going to make a tutorial on After Effects. I'm just showing you the process. So now all I have to do is go to File, Import, File. I believe I can do, no, just a regular file. And go to my desktop and find the ball bounce, Images, and then check this out. All I have to do is select the first file again of that sequence, which is 00. And then down here you're going to see it says TIFF sequence. So make sure this is checked on. If it's not checked on, it's just going to import one file. We don't want one file. We want the entire image sequence. And then just say open. I'm going to say unmat. It doesn't matter. And then here it is in my projects. All I have to do is click and drag it onto my timeline, and it's automatically going to make a comp for me. So there it is. You can see there's no background because it's a TIFF, and as I mentioned, when we do a render here and you see the alpha channel, this is the only thing that's going to render, the ball and the ground, no background. So if I come into After Effects, there's the ball, there's the ground, no background. But I can go ahead and play it, do a little preview here, and there it is. And I can come in here and add my own background. I can add a picture of a sky, I can whatever I want. I'm just gonna create a solid layer and make this sort of bluish. Let's pretend it's a sky. Hit OK and bring that layer behind my sequence. Render this out, and there we go. I can change this however I want. This is sort of how I did the Hulk animation when he breaks out of Maya. So I sort of rendered things out like this. I composite them in After Effects, but again, I'm not going to make this into a whole video of how to use After Effects. So now that we have the image sequence, now I can just come in here and say make this into a movie. So I would come in here to, where is make movie, Control M, add to render queue, and then from here I would just select my own, I can now save it as an AVI, I can add audio, format options. Again, I have the XVID compression format if I want it. I'm gonna just choose none. Okay, bouncing ball. And now this one, I'm gonna save it in here or just on the desktop, doesn't matter. Just say bouncing ball final, save, render. And then this is gonna render out now with my blue sky. So I can close all this, and there it is. Bouncing ball final. It's 53 megabytes, not too bad. I can open it, and there we go. I have a bouncing ball with a blue sky. And that is how you render things professionally in a studio. Now again, it's going to take time. I'm going to need to make a lighting tutorial so that we can render this out a lot better. Should be able to render or play with QuickTime as well. And there we go. Nice and crisp. I can Control L to loop it. I can change this to frame numbers. Control F for full screen. And that's it. That is how you can do 3 types of renders. Now again, you might think, well, doing the image sequence is longer because you have to render it out, then you have to take it into After Effects, and then you have to, you know, make it into a movie. Yeah, but it beats having your AVI crash when it's like 95% done and you lost a whole day. You know, this way, if it crashed you know, at 90%, I can just go ahead and continue off and finish off that last 10%. Just quickly drop it into After Effects and hit render. And you know, you might say, well, if it crashes in After Effects, you're screwed. But you know, at least I still have my image sequence completed. And so again, I'm just telling you how it's done professionally in studios. How I do my demo reel is like that. I render out image sequence. I always do Playblast to test things out. And I think that's it. That is how you render. That is the process of rendering. Rendering creates an image for you, and that is what you share with the world. It's just like hitting print. You saw when it's doing all the calculations, that's called rendering. This is my Maya scene. I cannot do anything with it but work on it. If I want to share it with the world, I have to render it. So with that, I leave you with the new word you've learned, rendering. You know how I render, how it's done. Awesome. Boom. Checking me out, animationmethods.com. I have a book out. I have a whole bunch of stuff for you, man. I don't want to go in there. Whatever. Peace out.